Chapter 11. The packed briefing room on the second floor hummed with low conversations. Mathias and Aaron slipped into the back and leaned against the wall. A whiff of ambrosia drifted to Mathias from his left. Sue grinned, wiggling manicured nails at him. Her gaze shifted to Aaron. The smile slid from her lips, her eyes narrowed, and she turned to face the front of the room. Mathias scooted beneath the air vent so the blood smells cycled away from him. The captain entered the room through the door at the front, Gomez at his heels. He lifted his hands.
Everyone, your attention, please.
The buzz died away.
We're getting down to the wire on this one, folks. We have a little over 24 hours before the ransom note's deadline. None of the teams called in critical information, but that doesn't mean you didn't find anything important. Detective Gomez will collect your reports.
Gomez stepped forward.
We'll take the teams one at a time. Listen to the other reports. If you hear something that ties into what you found, speak up. Physical evidence goes on this table. Parker and West, go.
One by one, the teams came forward. Each report echoed the previous. Tight-lipped employees, abandoned buildings, and no confirmed sightings of Jerome since the kidnapping. A shop owner complained someone had broken his window the previous night. Glass samples and a plaster cast of a boot print went onto the table. The manager of a pub said Jerome watched football there every Thursday. Fibers from his usual chair joined the collection. Mathias hunched his shoulders as the evidence pile grew. Next to him, Aaron dropped her head back against the wall with a thump. It would be another long night. 2 uniforms stood, and the senior officer spoke in a slow drawl.
Well, I didn't think we found much, but it sounds like we take the win so far. One of ours was a stop-and-go on the south side of town. A cashier saw Jerome buying groceries yesterday morning.
Gomez scribbled on his notepad.
You're right, that isn't much. Still, go back and dig some more. See if he said anything out of character or bought more food than usual. Boyd, Jensen, you're up.
Boyd, a powerful woman with a stern face, shook her head.
Nothing. We checked Sunrise Cafe and Best Auto.
Mathias exchanged glances with Aaron.
No one at the cafe would admit to knowing Jerome. The auto shop is boarded up. Looks like nobody's been there for at least a year.
Gomez nodded and moved to the next set of officers. Mathias's thoughts spun, blurring their words. The garage had been in the stack of business cards. He had no reason to distrust Travis, of course, but this was independent confirmation. His prey had to be hiding there. The demon urged him to run from the room, to hunt. The rich scent, the scalding heat coating his throat, the rush of energy. He could have that if he went.
Hawthorne.
Mathias's muscles were so tight that they jerked at the sound of his name. He blinked his eyes, and they came into focus on Gomez snapping his fingers at him.
Yo, Sleeping Beauty. Didn't I tell you to get some rest last night? Take this stuff down to evidence.
Sue and Aaron were already at the table loading their arms. The rest of the force gathered around the captain, who handed out patrol schedules. Mathias elbowed his way through the crowd to the table, holding his breath against Sue's scent. What excuse could he use to leave the lab? With both women there, it would be hard to sneak away, but he had to, soon. Now, the demon insisted. Aaron nudged his arm.
Are you going to tell Gomez about the auto shop? Or did you change your mind?
He gritted his teeth. Right. If he didn't talk to Gomez, Aaron would know something was up.
Tell Gomez what?
The loud question drew the attention of everyone in the room. Mathias turned. The detective loomed behind them, his scowl deeper than usual. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his breath reeked of stale coffee. Mathias stood erect, locking his face into an emotionless mask. Did you read the report on the mud from Jerome's house? Gomez wiped a hand down his face.
Just tell me what's in it. If you haven't noticed, I've been a little busy doing real police work.
The demon bristled. Mathias gathered his self-control and clamped down hard, his neck crawling at all the eyes on them. The mud had motor oil in it. The detective grunted.
So what?
So the list of businesses connected to Jerome includes an abandoned auto shop. You should go check it out.
Oh, I should go check it out, huh?
Gomez folded his arms, a deep flush creeping up his neck.
I've had it with your attitude, Hawthorne. I don't care if you're a CSI rock star. You need to remember your place, desk jockey.
Mathias clenched his hands into fists, his vision reddening. Gomez wouldn't know a good lead if it hit him over the head. This isn't about you, it's about Victoria. Memories flickered in the back of his skull. He rammed them down. You arrogant!
That's enough, you two.
Walker's voice resounded in the heavy silence.
You're making a spectacle of yourselves.
Someone tugged Mathias's sleeve.
Matt, hey, it's okay.
Aaron's voice distant beneath the ringing in his ears.
You told him. Let's go.
Gomez's cell phone buzzed. He jerked the phone to his ear and bellowed into the speaker.
What?
Oh, sorry to bother you, sir.
Mathias's sharp ears picked up the nervous voice on the other end.
You said to call if any credible tips came in.
The detective took a deep breath and let it out. When he replied, his voice was marginally calmer.
Well?
Someone reported an abandoned vehicle off Route 1, south of the city. License plate is missing, but the description matches the suspect's SUV.
I'll be right there.
He disconnected, cast a final glare at Mathias, and stalked out the door. As though his exit had broken a spell, low conversations erupted, and officers trickled from the room. More than one glanced at Mathias as they passed, some with hostile expressions, others sympathetic. Sue gave a low whistle.
He should switch to decaf.
She tilted her head to the side and frowned.
You were only trying to help.
Her scent burned his nose. Keeping his breathing shallow, he scooped up the remaining evidence from the table. Aaron and Sue traded looks, but he ignored them. If they wanted to bond over his sullen mood, let them. Juggling evidence, he headed down the corridor.
Your hands are full.
Aaron trotted past him and poked the elevator button.
Let me get that for you.
Mathias eyed the death box. That wasn't happening. I need to blow off some steam. I'm taking the stairs. Before they could argue, he elbowed the fire door open and escaped into the musty stairwell. He leaned against the door, taking slow, deep breaths. Someday he'd learn to stop letting Gomez wind him up like that. The man always chose the worst days to pick fights. He took his time descending the stairs. The outer room lay deserted when he entered, the evidence desk unmanned. Officer Boone must be out with the rest of the force. Mathias took a deep breath. Working so close to Sue this afternoon would tax his self-control to the limit. He shoved open the door. Aaron stood behind the table, sorting evidence bags. She gave him a tentative smile as he entered.
Feeling better?
Mathias managed a half-smile in return as he stacked his armload with the other bags. Where's Sue? Aaron raised an eyebrow.
The SUV.
Right. Gomez needed a CSI on site to process the vehicle, and it wouldn't be him today. He could live with that. In fact, Sue being gone was exactly what he needed right now. Instead of distracting him, she could deal with Gomez, and it would be that much easier to sneak out of the lab to the garage. Not even Boone was around to witness his escape. Except it wasn't easy. He and Aaron worked in comfortable silence cataloging samples, but he caught her watching him whenever he moved away from the table. An hour crept past, then 2. They logged the last of the evidence, and Mathias breathed a sigh of relief. Aaron would retreat to her lab to test samples, and he could slip away. Instead, she seated herself at her desk and turned on the computer. The demon growled. Mathias clenched his jaw to keep from snarling with it. What was she doing? She clicked with her mouse, then grunted and leaned back, rubbing her temples.
Look at this. Why didn't they call you if they needed photos? It'll take forever to process these.
Mathias moved behind her. A blurry photo with the highlights blown out glowed on the screen. Where did that come from? Aaron snorted.
Jensen took pictures with his phone. Parker emailed some too.
She dropped her head into her hands.
It's such a waste of time. All we're doing is confirming Mark wasn't there. I'm so tired I can't think straight.
I know how you feel. His own eyes burned with exhaustion, and he hadn't worked all night. He lifted his head. That was it. You've only had a couple hours sleep, Aaron. Take a nap. I'll cover for you. She shook her head.
I've got so much to do.
Hey. Mathias grabbed the back of her chair and spun her to face him. You want to help find Vicky, right?
Of course.
How good of a job can you do right now? She lowered her chin.
Okay, yeah. I'm not at the top of my game.
He crouched in front of her chair, lowering himself to her eye level. Go into the chem lab, lock the door, and catch some sleep. If anyone needs you, I'll come get you. Aaron closed her eyes and nodded. Then her eyes flew open and she pinned him with a sharp stare.
You're not going to disappear?
That's one trick I haven't learned yet. Mathias gave her an innocent smile. Where would I go? I have a ton of paperwork to catch up on. Her shoulders slumped. He had her.
No more than an hour.
She stood and drifted toward the chem lab.
Promise you'll wake me if I'm still sleeping.
Will do. The lock clicked behind her. Mathias forced himself to sit at his desk and look busy. 5 minutes later, her face appeared in the small window. As he'd suspected, she was checking up on him. That girl was too smart for her own good. He pretended to be absorbed in his typing. She withdrew from the door. Another 10 minutes ticked past. He stood, tiptoed to the door, and peered through the glass. Erin had tipped back an ergonomic chair and extended the footrest. Her eyelids fluttered but stayed closed, her chest rising and falling with deep, even breaths. Finally, the demon reared up, refusing to wait another minute. He'd invent a plausible cover story later. Mathias was halfway out the back door of the station when an exotic smell slapped him across the face. He froze. Gomez stood in the parking lot holding the door of his unmarked Charger. Sue slid from the passenger seat. Cursing, Mathias ducked back into the station. He'd have to go out the front and loop around to grab his truck. A lot of people would see him leave, but it couldn't be helped. He hustled up the corridor into the lobby, eyes forward and steps brisk, a man with somewhere to be. No one would question him.
You! Camera boy! Hamilton!
A vile smell assaulted his senses. He stumbled to a halt, black mist closing in on him. Blinking, he forced it to clear. Jessica Waterman stepped in front of him, her expression severe. "It's Hawthorne," he muttered.
Don't care, where do you think you're going?
Mathias cleared his throat.
It doesn't matter.
She waved a dismissive hand.
Come with me.
Waterman headed straight for the entrance to the back offices. Karen Chen gave Mathias a wide berth and scurried after her. As the CEO passed, the tip-line volunteers scrambled to their feet and stood at attention. The officers manning the desk hesitated, but Waterman quelled them with a look. One of them buzzed the security door open. She swept through with an imperious air. Everyone turned to stare at Mathias. A growl rumbled in his chest. That woman was a walking scourge. If he tried to leave now, the entire station would remember. Why couldn't she stick with bossing her own people around? He trailed after her, seething. The demon paced in his skull, ready to pounce. If only he could show her exactly how stupid it was to cross him. The chief's door was open a crack. Waterman pushed her way into the office without knocking. Gomez stood next to the chief, half bent over some paperwork on the desk. He lifted his head, eyes widening. Walker rose to his feet, his face a cool mask.
Miss Waterman, I assume you and your assistant are here to provide the fingerprints we requested to compare to the prints on the ransom note.
He glanced at Mathias.
Hawthorne can assist you.
I'm not here to ruin my manicure.
She gestured behind her without turning.
Harrison, close that door and get over here.
Mathias glowered at her back. The chief nodded to him. He flexed his fingers and did as she asked, resisting the urge to leave and slam it behind him.
It's been 24 hours.
She settled into the chair in front of Walker's desk and crossed her legs.
My daughter isn't home yet. You and your precinct are failing.
Detective Gomez located a vehicle matching the description of Mark Jerome's SUV.
Walker slid the report across the desk toward Waterman.
It was abandoned south of the city on Route 1.
And?
When no one answered, Waterman rotated her hand in a tell-me-more gesture.
Will it lead you to Victoria?
Gomez cleared his throat.
It's scrubbed pretty clean. Professional job. They filed the VIN and took the plates. Jerome was spotted on the south side, so we think he took your daughter that way.
Wrong.
Waterman slammed her hand onto the desk. Everyone flinched.
Karen, show Chief Walker how Fellman's finest ignore evidence.
Karen tapped on her tablet and handed it to the chief. His eyes narrowed as he scanned down the screen.
What is this?
Are you really that thick?
Waterman snatched the tablet back and shoved it at Karen.
It's right in front of you. An anonymous email delivered 2 hours ago.
A muscle in Walker's jaw twitched.
And you believe it?
The CEO lifted her hands in an exaggerated shrug.
Why don't we ask your crack team of investigators? Hawthorne, did you find some mud at Mark Jerome's house?
Mathias clasped his hands behind his back, knuckles aching with tension. Yes, ma'am.
And what did you find when you tested it?
Motor oil.
Very good.
Waterman turned her reptilian eyes on Gomez.
According to the email, Mr. Hawthorne brought this to your attention, did he not? Along with an auto shop linked to Jerome?
The detective opened and closed his mouth, then nodded, his eyebrows drawn together.
What was your response, pray tell?
Gomez gave an exasperated grunt.
Jerome's car is concrete evidence. I don't have time to chase down a lab guy's hunches.
Gomez turned to Walker.
The garage is a weak lead, Chief. We already checked the place out. It's abandoned, locked up tight. That oil could be from anywhere.
Waterman raised a delicate eyebrow.
Detective, are you aware Mark Jerome shared ownership of that garage with his half-brother?
Mathias started. How did she know that? The investigative team hadn't even gotten that far. Walker pursed his lips and looked at Gomez. Beads of sweat formed along the detective's hairline. A small part of Mathias's mind, not the demon, chuckled at his discomfort. Served him right. Maybe next time he'd listen.
My people dug up the connection in less than 30 minutes.
Waterman sat back, a satisfied smirk on her face.
But I don't employ idiots.
She tapped a finger on the chief's desk.
I want your people over there yesterday. Turn that place upside down.
We need a warrant for that?
Walker's voice was flat. A vein pulsed in his temple. Mathias couldn't remember the last time he'd seen the chief this angry.
It might take a couple hours.
Waterman snapped her fingers.
Karen, get Judge Wells on the phone.
Karen fumbled with her phone. She tapped the screen and held it out to Waterman. The CEO placed the phone next to her ear and studied her fingernails.
Robert, darling, it's Jessica. I need a favor. I'm sure you've heard.
The tension in the room was so thick Mathias could taste it. Walker shuffled through the report on the SUV. Gomez stared at the floor, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his expression dour. The rapid heartbeats agitated the demon, which in turn heightened Mathias's senses until his nerves jangled. Waterman's rancid smell hung over the room like a storm cloud. He slipped on his sunglasses just to be safe.
There.
Waterman stood.
Judge Wells will sign the warrant the moment you send it. Doing everyone's job is getting tiresome. I'm sure I don't have to remind you that you have less than 24 hours to find my darling girl.
She leaned forward and poked Gomez in the chest.
Don't drop the ball again.
Gomez stiffened.
I'll personally make sure we examine every inch of the place.
No, not you.
She turned to Mathias.
Ridiculous fashion sense aside.
She eyed his sunglasses.
You caught what everyone else missed. You're taking the lead on this.
The detective's voice came out strangled.
Hawthorne isn't qualified to...
Shush.
Waterman stretched out her arm toward Gomez and held up a finger.
You had your chance.
She stepped in front of Mathias.
Can you handle this, or should I find someone more qualified?
Mathias shot a glance at the chief. Walker nodded once.
He can handle it.
But, Chief...
Not now, Gomez.
The chief came around the desk, stopped a pace from Waterman, and lowered his voice.
Please forward me that email.
She met his eyes without flinching.
What email?
He took a deep breath.
The department hasn't released the information in that letter to the public. It mentions my team members by name and discusses events from an internal meeting. A leak could endanger the whole department, not just this investigation.
Sounds like you have a problem.
The CEO smiled, exposing her teeth.
I wish I could help, but my personal assistant is useless. She accidentally deleted the email. With the security measures on my account, we won't be able to recover it. So sorry.
All eyes turned to Karen. The small woman shrank beneath their gazes, but she tapped the tablet screen.
My apologies.
She whispered.
I must have deleted it.
Walker's face reddened.
That's destruction of evidence and interfering with an investigation. I don't care who you are, you can't...
Waterman turned on her heel.
Find my daughter, Walker, or you'll discover the hard way what I can and can't do.